Hello and welcome to A Cat in the Garden. Today we are going to talk about some of my biggest garden fails this season growing here in my garden in Central Texas. There weren't too many. I actually had a really successful season growing produce overall, but I still had quite a few fails. I guess a couple really that I want to highlight and sort of talk about the lessons that I've learned from trying to grow these crops in different ways and failing miserably. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and check those out. The first crop that was a failure this year is kind of a failure, kind of not, but I wanted to highlight it because it did not turn out the way that I wanted it to, and that is going to be carrots here. If you remember in some of my garden tours earlier on, in the summer, you would have seen I had a nice row of carrots that grew really tall and eventually flowered. I left the flowers there. I thought they were really cool. The pollinators liked them a lot. And I just thought it would be cool to see what would happen when they went to seed. Well, they went to seed and I forgot to collect the flower heads that had turned to seed. And so this happened. I have an entire blanket of half of this raised bed that is completely covered in carrots. And not only is it covered in carrots, but they are all different shapes and sizes. They are all growing way too close together, and it's just a big mess. Not only do I have carrots here, I have some in the tomato beds behind me. I have some in beds that are like halfway across the garden. I have carrots everywhere, and you might be thinking, that's not a failure, you got a lot of carrots out of it. I didn't really, because any carrot that flowered and went to seed actually becomes woody as soon as it flowers, and it is no longer edible. So I had to scrap every single carrot that flowered. Luckily, it was only about 3 of them, but it still was enough to kind of damper the effect that I had. It was probably about 1/3 of the carrots I had in the row anyway. And then on top of that, I have carrots that are growing way too close together. When they're growing too close together, they don't always get to a nice big shape because they're crowded. I personally do not really have the heart to separate them most of the time. I don't know if I'm going to do it right now or if maybe I'll get the courage to do it later, but it is a problem in the garden. I also have the problem where I wanted to use this garden for a lot of other root crops this fall. I wanted to put in celery, I wanted to put in parsnips, I wanted to put in radishes. And right now, I basically have to wait until I decide what I'm doing with all of these carrots. I do have 2 rows of green beans back here that will be done as soon as it freezes. So once it freezes, I'll be able to clear out all of these plants and put in some of those root crops that I wanted to grow. But that's only about 1/3 of the bed here. I also have a row of scallions that I wanted to replace, but I can't really do that right now because it's just a blanket of carrots. There is one positive to this though, one that doesn't directly affect me, but I just think it's really neat to see. So I'm gonna bring you in closer so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to have to bring you in closely here so you can really see. It looks like Nutmeg found one. Yeah, he's chowing down on a carrot leaf right now actually. But there are a bunch of swallowtail caterpillars in my carrots. This batch has a few left. I think most of the ones that were in here went to go become a chrysalis and then a butterfly, but I will take you over to the other patch so you can see more of them in action. Nutmeg actually beat me to it over here. I think he was watching them from a distance, but over here I have quite a few of these swallowtail caterpillars. There's some there, some over here, and we'll kind of go around so I can show you a few more. So this is a bit of a silver lining for the carrots. Not a complete failure, even though obviously I'm not the one eating them. The swallowtails are enjoying them, and they will become butterflies that will pollinate my garden throughout the fall and then in the spring. The next failure is actually behind Nutmeg over here and behind this parsley, and that is going to be squash. So I did try to grow some squash over here. I tried growing butternut squash, spaghetti squash, and pumpkins. I ended up with 2 pumpkins, and I'll show you really quickly the one pumpkin that is still growing here. This is a bit smaller than the other one that I grew, and I'm really concerned because we only have about a month left until we get our frost. I would like to see it at least starting to turn color before I can harvest it. That way I know it will ripen all the way inside. But yeah, it hasn't been successful. I used this entire 6x4 bed to try and grow squash this year, and all I got for it was a couple, so that was a big failure. But back to the zucchini over here, this was even more of a failure. Because I had such an issue with squash vine borers, which is why squash didn't grow well over there, I thought I'd try this experiment where I made a cage and covered it with shade cloth and clamped it down so no bugs could get inside. And it worked really well, as my zucchini did not get any squash vine borers. But as you can see here, they're pretty much dead. They had a huge aphid problem. Actually, they might still have it. So let me go ahead and take this off so I can give you guys a better look. Nutmeg is definitely curious about it a little bit now that I've opened it up. But here you can kind of see what is going on. So that is completely covered in aphids, and I was going to get ladybugs to put in here because they would be trapped, but then we got some cold temperatures down to about 43 degrees, and it was just too much for these plants to handle. They were doing really well growing up these tomato cages I bought for them. Oh, and of course, look, another carrot. Are we surprised? Not at all. So yeah, they were doing well growing up the cages. I actually got one straight neck squash from this, what was a plant here? Oh wow, this is the worst one. That's so bad. That one back there still looks okay, but these look done. They're terrible. I honestly think I'm gonna take the shade cloth off. It's not even that hot anymore, and I'm just gonna let it be because this has been an absolute failure. I do think what I'm gonna do next year is I'm going to do this setup, but I'm going to do it earlier. I think I just ran out of time by the time I came up with this idea. It was too late in the season. These are really warm weather loving crops, except for if it gets over 95, which I think this will really come in handy in the middle of summer when we are in the hundreds constantly. I might be able to be free of the borers, still get crops, and they'll be shaded a little bit from the worst of the heat. So it's a good idea in concept. It still ended up in failure. I think I got a total of 5. I got 5 of the zucchini and straight neck squash throughout the entire summer, and I had about 10 plants. So really, truly a failure back here. But hey, my rosemary looks really good, and my marigolds, they're looking nice, and of course the giant basil back there. But yeah, this is a good idea. I will implement it last year. It just needs a little bit of tweaking to deal with these aphids, and I have to do it earlier. So I will try it again. I'll probably do a whole video on it next year because I have this concept that I really like now, and it did work. I will say it did keep out the squash vine borers. I did not have a single one on any of these 4 plants. It just ended up being way too late in the season for them, unfortunately. So those were our garden failures this year. Not too bad, honestly. It could have been worse. And like I said, it was a really successful summer growing season overall, but there are definitely things I can improve on next year, and I'm really hoping and I'm really determined to just be successful with squash next year. I love eating squash. I love summer squash. I love storing and preserving winter squash to have all winter long. So it was really a bummer to just not be able to have that kind of harvest that I'm used to having when I garden up north. But if you also have any suggestions about getting aphids off of the zucchini squash, that would be greatly appreciated. I know I can get the ladybugs and keep them trapped in there and they'll do a good job, but I'm really open to suggestions. If you have any better ideas, I am totally down to hear it. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to give Nutmeg and I a thumbs up down below and subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here on the channel. Thank you so much again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.